Hey, what's up everyone, Ragey Golden Eagle here, having way too much fun as always. And fresh off the heels of recording my previous video, let's continue our talk about overcriminalization. I love it when a tangent becomes a full-blown video, don't you? But either way, ever since studying criminal justice in college a decade ago now, this specific topic has always been one of my favorite points of study. And preaching when you get me on my damn soapbox like right now. I really wish some of the lawyer YouTubers would cover this topic more. It's extremely important and I personally can't get into nearly as much detail as they would be able to. But why is this topic important? Well, just like social media terms of service are designed to be so vague that literally everyone using the platform could be found in violation of them, laws go for a similar goal as well. Though in the case of laws, in addition to a lot of them being extremely vague and subjective, and the fact that they are often used completely differently than they were originally intended, as we're about to get into, there are so many of them that it's guaranteed you are breaking probably a couple dozen right now without even knowing it. Either way, here's a nice short article summarizing this issue and why it's so damn important. Yeah, it's a few years old, but it's more relevant now than ever since we just keep making more laws without repealing older, outdated ones. Too many laws means too many criminals. When 3 missing fish can land someone in jail on felony charges, reform is needed. Amen. And we're gonna jump right into the fish here soon. I'm all about getting to the fish as quickly as possible, you know me. But first there's this brilliant quote, the perfect way to start an article on this topic. There is no one in the United States over the age of 18 who cannot be indicted for some federal crime. Retired Louisiana State University law professor John Baker told the Wall Street Journal in July 2011. That is not an exaggeration. And I know some of you may think it is. Some of you might find this hard to believe. So speaking of fish, here's an example of how a runaway bureaucracy can completely ruin your life at a moment's notice. One day you're just minding your own business, being a productive member of society as you usually are, not hurting anybody and just keeping to yourself, when all of a sudden a story like this happens to you. John Yates built his career as a commercial fisherman. In August of 2007, Yates and his crew were fishing in the Gulf of Mexico off the Florida coast when a state conservation officer who was also a deputized federal agent boarded his vessel to inspect their catch of red grouper. After inspecting some 3,000 fish, that's gotta be the most exciting job ever, the official identified 72 red grouper that did not meet the minimum 20-inch conservation standard and issued a citation from the state. He ordered Yates to bring the undersized catch when he returned to port. When Yates returned to port the next day, armed federal agents stood by while inspectors re-examined his catch. Man, this guy's such a hardened criminal, isn't he? They need the armed agents there. But either way, they found only 79 fish under the minimum standard. Federal officials accused Yates of destroying evidence, the missing 3 red grouper, related to a federal investigation. And then nothing happened, right? Not quite. Nearly 3 years later, the federal government charged me with the destruction of evidence, yes, fish, to impede a federal investigation. I was subsequently arrested at my home. I have been blacklisted by boat owners who fear federal investigations similar to mine. I am now unable to make a living doing what I love to do. Yeah, that's pretty insane, isn't it? Not just what they did to him over 3 missing fish. It's not like he was trying to get rid of all 3 that they found, right? No, they found 72. They still have 69 of them. But anyway, what's really insane here is the fact that this is an issue in the first place. Obviously, some smaller fish will be brought in with the others when you cast out nets. And I'm sure they don't measure every single damn one of these fish, they just eyeball them. And I'm sure a few 19-inchers probably made it through. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the 3 so-called missing fish were right on the border of being at 20 inches and were just mismeasured, either by the original officer or by the agents at the port. And they probably weren't even missing at all. So once again, imagine if something like this happened to you. And know that it can happen at pretty much any time. Imagine you're just doing your job the same way you've always done it, the way you've been trained to do it. And hell, you've probably even been audited a few times and no issues were found, or if some were found, they got fixed. Then one day you get screwed over on a technicality like this poor guy did and your whole life is ruined. Welcome to the free world. Does this shit sound like something people living in a free society should have to worry about? Well, while you think about that, here's how they got him. In August of 2011, Yates was convicted and sentenced to a 30-day jail term and 3 years of supervised release under a provision in the 2002 Sarbanes-Oxley law, which was passed in the wake of the Enron scandal. You guys noticing a pattern yet? All these knee-jerk laws seem to be pretty horrible. It's almost as if you should actually think this through instead of pushing it through quickly as a knee-jerk emotional reaction, huh? Oh, who am I kidding? I must just be crazy. The law's anti-shredding provision, meant to apply to the destruction of documents or files related to a federal financial fraud investigation, has nothing to do with fish. Yup, as I mentioned earlier, they have no problem just repurposing completely unrelated laws to get you with something when they are really after you. I don't know what this poor guy did, but they really wanted him. And the sad part is, as long as the letter of the law doesn't say they can't do it, they can get away with anything. In my opinion, this is actually one of the biggest flaws in our legal system, that it is a lot more focused on the letter of the law than the intent of the law. Hell, it's so bad that if the letter of the law could be interpreted and twisted to mean the exact opposite of what was intended, the courts would have no problem just allowing it on through. But side rant aside, why is this issue, the issue of overcriminalization, so important? Well, I'm sure my one socialist viewer is about to get butthurt, but we were warned of this years ago. In Ayn Rand's magnum opus, Atlas Shrugged, Dr. Floyd Ferris, one of the book's main antagonists, told Hank Rearden, a proud producer who had earned the ire of crony special interest and government officials, that there's no way to rule innocent men. The only power government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, one makes them, said Ferris. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. This mindset right here is exactly where the famous line, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime," comes from. If literally everyone is a criminal, then if you just want to get rid of any one person in particular, just point at them, launch an investigation, and after probably just a few days, boom, there you go, enough evidence to lock them up for years. Again, this is not something people who live in an allegedly free society should have to worry about. This is Soviet shit right here. But, as usual, it gets better. The United States now has some 300,000 federal regulations, and this long spool of burdensome and complex red tape grows every year. And this, by the way, isn't even counting like local, state laws. None of that. There's a lot more than the 300,000. What's more, there are about 4,500 federal criminal statutes on the books carrying fines or prison terms for offenders. Now, who has the ability to memorize and know hundreds of thousands of pages of laws to make sure they're not breaking any? Lawyers actually love this, because it means they will always be in demand. They would actually freaking hate it if the legal system was slimmed down and reformed and an average Joe like me could know all the laws that pertain to a given situation without paying mad money to a lawyer to gather it all up. So sadly, given the fact that pretty much all politicians are also lawyers, this will never change. And as for the federal statutes, how are those different than normal laws? Well, from what I remember when studying criminal justice, the way our system was originally designed, it required you to have both committed a criminal action and had criminal intent. Now, as I'm sure you notice, pretty much all of the intent part has gone completely out the window in current year, though this is one point I concede you can argue whether or not it's good or bad, since you can't prove 100% what someone's intent was unless you can read their minds. But either way, a lot of this stripping out intent has to do with statutes. Take, for example, statutory rape laws. Say, for example, you had sex with a girl who looks 19 and even showed you her ID to prove it. She was actually 16 and the ID was fake. Age of consent where you live is 18. Your ass is now getting locked up because of the statutory rape laws. It doesn't matter that you didn't even know. It doesn't even matter that you were deceived into it. All that matters is that you did it. Only the action has to be there, and that's enough. Now, luckily for us, right now, in order to maintain the illusion of a free society, our government is forced to be very selective of who it uses this unlimited power against. As long as we still have some form of free media, and by that I mean the alt media, not the lying, fake news spreading mainstream media, as long as we have the alt media, there will be public outrage if they abuse this power too often, because unlike the mainstream media, the alt media will report on it. But the second an actual totalitarian tyrant wants to seize absolute power, much of the infrastructure they would need to enforce this absolute power is already in place. And most people don't even know or care about it, or perhaps even support it in some cases. At least until they or someone they love find themselves on the receiving end anyway. So I'll leave you off with one more paragraph from the article. There are so many regulations and criminal statutes on the books that a civil liberties expert and lawyer, Harvey Silverglate, thinks that the average American commits 3 felonies a day and they often are not even aware they are breaking the law. That is, not until a federal agency begins an investigation and they are indicted. And that's all I gotta say, guys. Thanks for listening.